How do I tell my boyfriend I leaked his mom's OnlyFans to his entire family? He explicitly told me to never speak about finding her account, but after what he did to me, I wanted him to feel the same humiliation. Now his dad's filing for divorce, his mom's been disowned by the church, and he's coming home from deployment tomorrow. It started when Derek left for a 6-month deployment. Before leaving, he made me promise to stay faithful, delete all my male contacts, and video call him every night to prove I was home alone. I agreed because I loved him. 2 months in, his army buddy Kyle messaged me. Derek had been bragging about his side piece on base, some officer's daughter he'd been hooking up with since week 1. Kyle sent receipts, photos, messages, even a video of Derek saying, "What my girlfriend doesn't know won't hurt her." I was destroyed. But instead of confronting him, I wanted revenge that would match my pain. I remembered finding his mom's secret Twitter account months ago. She'd accidentally logged in on Derek's laptop. Cougar Sandra 47, with links to paid content. I'd screenshot everything before promising Derek I'd never mention it. His mom portrayed herself as the perfect pastor's wife, running prayer groups and teaching Sunday school. His dad bragged about their pure marriage at church. Derek worshipped them as the perfect couple. So I created a fake account and subscribed to her OnlyFans. The content was extensive. Apparently, the pastor's wife had a thing for roleplay involving multiple partners. There were hundreds of videos, custom content, live streams. She was making $30,000 a month while pretending to survive on her husband's modest church salary. I sat on this information for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came when Derek posted on Instagram from his deployment, a photo with the officer's daughter on his lap at some military bar, captioned, "What happens on deployment stays on deployment, wink face." His entire family followed his Instagram. They all saw it. His mom commented, "Derek, who is this?" His dad wrote, "Son, we need to talk." That's when I struck. I created an anonymous email and sent everything to their entire church mailing list. Every elder, every congregation member, every youth group parent. The subject line? The pastor's wife's secret ministry. But I didn't stop there. I sent it to Derek's military command. Fraternization with an officer's daughter is a violation. His siblings' workplaces, his cousins, his grandmother's bingo group. Within hours, his mom was calling me sobbing. His dad had locked her out of their house. The church fired them both. His sister texted that their grandmother had a heart episode from the shock. His brother's engagement was called off because his fiance's family didn't want to be associated with that family. Derek's commanding officer called me asking if I had any more information about his conduct violations. Apparently, the officer's daughter was 17. Now Derek's flying home tomorrow, dishonorably discharged, to find his entire life destroyed. His last text, "Baby, I made a mistake, but I love you. Can't wait to come home to normal life." He has no idea his mom is now living in her car, his dad is in therapy, his siblings won't speak to anyone, and their family church is considering pressing charges for moral fraud. But here's the thing. I just found out I'm pregnant. I stare at the positive pregnancy test in my bathroom, my hands shaking so hard I nearly drop it. The 2 pink lines blur as tears fill my eyes. Derek comes home tomorrow from his dishonorable discharge, expecting to return to normal life with me. He has no idea his entire world has been destroyed. The timing is impossible. I need to figure out if this baby is even his before he walks through that door. I set the test on the counter and grip the sink, my knuckles turning white. 8 weeks. That would put conception right before he left for deployment. Back when I was still following all his controlling rules. Back when I loved him enough to delete every male contact from my phone and video call him every single night to prove I was home alone. I grab my phone and search for women's health clinics nearby. My fingers fumble across the screen as I dial the first number. The nurse answers on the 3rd ring, her voice calm and professional. I try to explain that I need an appointment as soon as possible, but my voice cracks halfway through. She must hear the panic because she tells me she can squeeze me in this afternoon between other patients. I thank her and hang up, then spend the next 3 hours pacing my apartment. Derek's last text glows on my phone screen. "Can't wait to see you, baby. Everything's going to be perfect." I want to throw the phone across the room. Nothing is going to be perfect. His mom is living in her car. His dad filed for divorce. His sister's engagement ended. His grandmother had a heart episode. And it's all because of me. The clinic waiting room smells like antiseptic and old magazines. I fill out paperwork with shaking hands, checking boxes about my medical history and last period. The nurse calls my name and leads me to an exam room. The doctor is a middle-aged woman with kind eyes who doesn't ask questions about why I'm crying. She confirms what I already know. 8 weeks pregnant. Conception happened right before Derek left for deployment. The timeline makes me feel sick. I was so devoted to him then. I followed every controlling rule he set. I proved my loyalty every single night while he was on base bragging about his side piece to his army buddies. The doctor schedules a follow-up appointment for next week, but I know everything will explode before then. I drive home in a daze, barely paying attention to the road. My hands grip the steering wheel so tight they ache. I take a detour past the street where Derek's parents' house is. 2 blocks away, I see Sandra sitting in her car. My stomach drops. She's clearly been sleeping there. Blankets are visible in the back seat. Trash accumulates on the floor. Empty water bottles and food wrappers scattered everywhere. Down as I pass, my heart pounding. The guilt feels completely different from the satisfaction I felt when I first sent those emails. That satisfaction lasted maybe an hour before it started turning into something else. Something heavy and sick that sits in my stomach like a stone. I drive past quickly, hoping she didn't see me. The image of her living in that car burns into my brain. The perfect pastor's wife reduced to homelessness because I wanted revenge. Back home, I try to figure out what to say when Derek arrives tomorrow. Does he even know about his mom yet? Has he been too focused on his own dishonorable discharge to check in with his family? His last few texts have been weirdly upbeat considering he just lost his military career. Like he thinks coming home to me will fix everything. Like I'm some kind of safe harbor waiting for him. I scroll through our text history. Made a mistake, but I love you. Can't wait for things to get back to normal. We'll work through this together. Every message makes me feel worse. He has no idea what's waiting for him. No idea that his entire family has been destroyed. No idea that I'm the one who destroyed them. My phone buzzes with a message from Kyle. Hey, you okay? Has Derek contacted you about everything that went down? I stare at the message for a long time before responding. Kyle probably knows more about what happened to Derek's family than I do. Military guys gossip worse than anyone. I type back asking what Derek knows. Kyle responds within seconds. He's been spiraling for the past week but won't tell anyone why. Keeps saying he needs to get home to fix things. You know what's going on? I don't answer. How do I explain that I'm the reason Derek's life fell apart? That I took his cheating and turned it into a nuclear bomb that destroyed innocent people? I set my phone down and walk to the kitchen. Pour a glass of water. Dump it out. Pour another one. My hands won't stop shaking. That evening, my phone rings. Marissa's name flashes on the screen. My stomach clenches. This is the first time she's called me since the exposure. I almost don't answer. But I know I have to face this eventually. Her voice is cold and shaking when I pick up. Was it you? Were you the one who sent those emails about my mother? I open my mouth to lie, but nothing comes out. My silence answers the question. Marissa starts crying so hard she can barely breathe. Huge, gasping sobs that make my chest hurt. I grip the phone tighter, wishing I could take it all back. Wishing I had just confronted Derek about his cheating like a normal person, instead of destroying his entire family. Marissa's crying slows down enough for her to talk. Her voice is raw and broken. My fiancé's family called off the engagement. They don't want to be associated with that kind of family. She pauses and I hear her take a shaky breath. I lost my job too. Someone sent the information to my workplace. My coworkers made my life so unbearable that I had to quit. Another pause. Derek cheating on you doesn't justify destroying innocent people's lives. I have no response because she's right. She's completely right. I destroyed people who never hurt me. People who didn't even know about Derek's infidelity. I made them pay for his sins because I was too angry to think straight. I'm sorry, I whisper, but the words are pathetic and useless. Marissa makes a sound that might be a laugh or a sob. Sorry doesn't give me back my life. She hangs up. I run to the bathroom and throw up. My whole body shakes as I kneel on the cold tile floor. I don't know if it's morning sickness or guilt or both. Probably both. I flush the toilet and lean against the wall, staring at myself in the mirror. I barely recognize the person staring back. When did I become someone who could destroy an entire family to hurt one person? When did revenge become more important than basic human decency? The satisfaction I felt sending those emails feels like it happened to a different person. Someone cruel and vindictive who I don't want to be. I think about Derek's grandmother having a heart episode. About Marissa losing her fiancé and her job. About Sandra living in her car. About Rocco's engagement ending. All because I wanted Derek to hurt the way he hurt me. I wash my face with cold water, but it doesn't help. Nothing helps. I can't sleep that night. Every time I close my eyes, I see Sandra's car full of blankets and trash. I see Marissa's name on my phone screen. I hear her voice breaking as she tells me about her ruined life. At 2 a.m., I give up trying to sleep. I get dressed and drive around the city, trying to clear my head. The streets are empty except for a few other insomniacs and night shift workers. I drive without any destination in mind, just moving because staying still feels impossible. I end up parked outside the church where Sandra used to teach Sunday school. There's graffiti on the side of the building now. Cruel words about hypocrites and sinners spray-painted in red. Someone drew crude pictures and wrote things I can't repeat. The church community turned on the Winters family so fast it's like they were waiting for an excuse. All those years of pretending to be good Christians, and the second someone fell, they attacked like wolves. I sit in my car staring at the graffiti, feeling sick. I did this. I gave them the excuse they needed to destroy a family they claimed to love. I drive back through the city as the sky turns gray with early morning light, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. The church graffiti is still burned into my mind when I pull into a gas station to get coffee. I need caffeine if I'm going to make it through today. I park near the pumps and walk toward the convenience store entrance. That's when I see Sandra's car pull in 3 spots away from mine. My whole body goes cold. She doesn't notice me as she gets out, moving slow like every movement hurts. Her hair is greasy and pulled back in a messy ponytail. She's wearing the same clothes I saw her in yesterday, wrinkled from sleeping in them. The woman who used to look perfect for church every Sunday now looks like she's aged 10 years in 3 weeks. I duck behind a display of windshield washer fluid inside the store and watch through the window as Sandra walks to the bathroom. She's carrying a small bag with her, probably her toiletries for washing up in gas station sinks. This is what I did to her. I watch her come back out 5 minutes later, her face damp like she splashed water on it. She goes to the counter and counts out change carefully for a small coffee, digging through her purse for exact coins. The cashier looks impatient, but Sandra doesn't seem to notice or care. She takes her coffee and walks back to her car slowly, getting in and just sitting there with both hands wrapped around the cup. I wait until she drives away before I leave the store with my own coffee. I follow her from a distance, staying back far enough that she won't notice my car. She drives through town to the south side where the grocery stores are. She pulls into a parking lot behind a big chain supermarket and parks near the back corner. That's when I see the other cars. There are maybe 5 or 6 vehicles scattered around the back of the lot, all of them with blankets visible in the windows or stuff piled in the back seats. People are living in these cars. Sandra parks among them like she's found some kind of community of displaced people. I watch from across the lot as she settles in for the day. She pulls out a book and opens it on her steering wheel, sipping her coffee slowly to make it last. The image of the perfectly put-together pastor's wife is completely gone. This is just a woman living in her car, trying to get through another day. I sit there for maybe 20 minutes watching her read. She doesn't do anything else, just reads and drinks her coffee. Eventually, I drive away because I can't stand looking at what I created anymore. My phone buzzes with a text as I'm pulling out of the parking lot. It's from Derek. His flight lands at 3 p.m. and he asks if I can pick him up from the airport. My hands start shaking as I read the message. I need to see his face when I tell him everything. I need to watch him realize what his cheating cost everyone, but I'm not sure I'm ready for what's about to happen. I type back that I'll be there and send the message before I can change my mind. Back at my apartment, I can't sit still. I start cleaning even though everything is already clean. I scrub the kitchen counters until my hands hurt. I vacuum the living room carpet 3 times. I clean the bathroom mirror and sink and toilet. The pregnancy test is hidden in my bathroom drawer and I keep opening the drawer to stare at it. The 2 pink lines haven't changed. I still haven't decided if I'm going to tell Derek about the baby during our confrontation or keep it to myself. Maybe I should wait until after I tell him about his mom. Maybe I should never tell him at all. I close the drawer again and go back to cleaning. At 2 p.m., I'm sitting in my car outside my apartment trying to calm down when my phone rings. The caller ID shows a number I don't recognize with a local area code. I answer it carefully. A man's voice asks if this is me, and I say yes. He introduces himself as Cameron Huang and says he's an attorney who specializes in digital privacy law. Someone gave him my name regarding a potential case involving distribution of intimate content without consent. My blood runs cold. Sandra or her lawyer must have figured out I was behind the emails. Cameron keeps talking in a professional voice. He explains that what I did, distributing Sandra's OnlyFans content to her church and family and community, could be charged as revenge porn or harassment depending on how the prosecutor wants to handle it. He says he's calling as a courtesy to let me know Sandra is considering pressing charges, and I should probably get my own lawyer. I try to respond, but my throat is too tight. Cameron gives me his card information and tells me to call him if I want representation. He says cases like this can result in jail time if they're prosecuted hard. I hang up without saying anything else. I open my car door just in time to throw up in the parking lot. My whole body shakes as I lean out of the car. Everything I ate this morning comes up and I'm left dry, heaving over the asphalt. I could go to jail. I could actually go to jail for what I did. I wipe my mouth with a napkin from my glove box and try to breathe normally. I have to pick up Derek in an hour and I'm still shaking. I drive to the airport on autopilot, my mind completely blank. The terminal is crowded with families waiting for soldiers to come home. There are balloons and signs and little kids bouncing with excitement. I stand near the arrival gate with none of that. Derek comes out alone carrying just a duffel bag. He looks terrible. His face is pale and his eyes are red like he hasn't slept in days. He sees me across the crowd and tries to smile, but it doesn't reach his eyes. I know in that moment that he knows everything. We walk to my car without talking. The silence between us is heavy and awful. I pull out of the airport parking garage and head toward my apartment. The radio plays softly, but neither of us changes the station or speaks. Derek keeps opening his mouth like he wants to say something and then closing it again. We're halfway back to my place when he finally asks if I really sent those emails about his mom. I say yes without taking my eyes off the road. Derek starts crying in the passenger seat. Not quiet tears, but big ugly sobs that shake his whole body. He covers his face with his hands and cries so hard he can barely breathe. I keep driving and don't say anything. What is there to say? He tells me between sobs that his mom called him a week ago from a gas station bathroom. She was begging him to wire her money because his dad locked her out and she had nowhere to go. Derek sent her everything he had left, which wasn't much after the dishonorable discharge destroyed his benefits. He says she was crying, so hard on the phone he could barely understand her. I pull into my apartment parking lot and park in my usual spot. We sit in the car with the engine off. Derek wipes his face with his sleeve and starts telling me everything. His dad won't speak to him. Marissa's engagement ended and she won't return his calls. Rocco lost his job after someone sent the information to his workplace. Their grandmother is in the hospital with heart problems from the stress. The church is considering pressing fraud charges against his parents for accepting donations, while his mom was secretly making money from OnlyFans. Derek turns to look at me with his face red and swollen. He asks why I did it, his voice cracking on the last word. I pull out my phone and show him the screenshots from Kyle. The photos of him with Natasha at that bar, her sitting on his lap with his arm around her waist. The messages where he called me his ball and chain back home while bragging about his deployment girlfriend to the other guys. The Instagram post that started everything. Derek's face goes from red to white as he scrolls through the evidence. He stops on one particular message where he wrote about how I'd never find out because I was too busy following his stupid rules. His hands start shaking and he says she told him she was 19. The way he says it makes something cold settle in my stomach because I realize he still doesn't know the worst part. I open the email from his commanding officer and hand him my phone again. Derek reads it slowly, his lips moving slightly as he processes the words. The investigation found that Natasha was 17 when their relationship started. Not just 17 now, but 17 the whole time. The discharge wasn't just about fraternization with an officer's daughter. It was about conduct unbecoming an officer, which is military code for something way more serious. Derek starts breathing too fast. These short, gasping breaths that make me worried he might pass out right here in my car. He looks up at me with his eyes wide and panicked. He could face criminal charges. Real criminal charges, not just military discipline. The phone slips from his hand onto the floor of my car and he puts both hands over his face. We sit there for maybe 10 minutes before I finally open my car door. Derek follows me up to my apartment like he's in a dream, moving slowly and carefully like the ground might disappear under his feet. I unlock the door and he walks inside and goes straight to my couch. He doesn't sit down normally. He just kind of collapses, his whole body going limp like someone cut all the strings holding him up. I stay standing near the door with my keys still in my hand. Derek stares at the coffee table and says he made a terrible mistake cheating on me. His voice is flat and empty. He says he never meant for his entire family to be destroyed, never wanted his mom homeless or his dad filing for divorce or his grandmother in the hospital. I walk over and sit in the chair across from him, not on the couch. I need the distance. I tell him I made a terrible mistake too. I tell him about the lawyer who called, about how I could be charged with revenge porn or harassment for distributing his mom's content. We're both facing potential criminal charges now. Him for his relationship with Natasha, me for what I did to Sandra. Derek looks up at me and I see something like recognition in his eyes, like he's finally understanding that we're both drowning in the same mess we created. Derek asks if we can fix this. His voice has this desperate edge to it that makes my chest hurt. He asks if there's any way to undo what's been done, to take it all back somehow. I think about the pregnancy test sitting in my bathroom drawer right now. Those 2 pink lines that haven't changed no matter how many times I've checked. Things are about to get so much more complicated. I open my mouth to tell him about the baby, but the words stick in my throat. Instead, I say we need to talk about something else. Derek's face somehow goes even paler than it already was. He knows that tone. He knows more bad news is coming and he's bracing for impact. My phone starts ringing before I can say anything else. I look at the screen and see a number I don't recognize with our area code. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up. A man's voice asks if this is me, and I say yes. He says his name is Harper and he needs to talk to me about what I did to his family. Derek's dad. Derek hears his father's voice coming through my phone and reaches for it, but I pull away. I stand up and walk toward the kitchen, turning my back on Derek. Harper's voice sounds rough and broken, like he's been crying or drinking or maybe both. He says he needs me to understand what I did. Harper tells me that Sandra tried to hurt herself last night. The words hit me like a punch and I have to grab the kitchen counter to stay standing. She's in the hospital now on a psychiatric hold, which means they think she's a danger to herself. Harper's voice shakes as he explains that she'd been living in her car for weeks, completely cut off from everyone she knew. The church community that used to be her whole world turned vicious. People left cruel notes on her car windshield. They posted about her online, sharing her OnlyFans content and calling her every terrible name they could think of. Sandra finally broke down completely. I feel like the room is tilting sideways. Harper keeps talking and I can hear him crying now. He found Sandra in the church parking lot at midnight with a bottle of pills. She'd parked in the same spot where she used to teach Sunday school, back when everyone thought she was the perfect pastor's wife. Harper says he still loves her despite everything, despite the lies and the secret life and the money she hid from him. But the divorce is still happening because he can't face the church community anymore. They turned on both of them so fast and so completely that there's no going back. His voice gets harder when he asks me if destroying his wife was worth whatever satisfaction I got from my revenge. If seeing Sandra broken and suicidal made me feel better about Derek's cheating. Derek stands up and walks over to me. He takes the phone from my hand before I can stop him. I can only hear his side of the conversation, but it's enough. He says Dad over and over, his voice cracking each time. Harper must be yelling because Derek holds the phone away from his ear for a second. Then he's crying again, big tears running down his face as he tells his father he's sorry. He promises to come see Sandra in the hospital tomorrow. He promises to help however he can. When he hangs up, he just stands there holding my phone and staring at nothing. We sit in silence for a long time after that. The apartment is completely quiet except for the sound of Derek crying and trying not to cry. I count the seconds in my head. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Finally, I say the words I've been holding back. I'm pregnant. My voice comes out flat and emotionless, like I'm reading a grocery list instead of changing both our lives forever. Derek's face goes through about 5 different expressions in the space of 3 seconds. Shock, then confusion, then something that might be hope, then fear, and finally settling on this numb kind of shock. He asks if I'm sure it's his. The question hits me like a slap, even though it's completely fair given everything that's happened between us. I pull out my phone and show him the paperwork from the clinic. 8 weeks pregnant. I point to the date and count backwards with him. 8 weeks ago was right before he left for deployment. Back when I was still following all his controlling rules about deleting my male contacts and video calling him every night to prove I was home alone. Back when I was faithful and devoted and stupidly in love with him. Derek looks at the timeline and then puts his head in his hands. "This is so messed up," he says. It might be the most honest thing either of us has said to each other in months. We end up on opposite ends of my couch. Neither of us sleeping. Both of us just staring at the ceiling in the dark. Derek keeps asking what we're going to do about the baby, and I keep saying I don't know because that's the truth. The pregnancy feels like a trap that's going to keep us tied to this mess forever, no matter what happens with the legal stuff or his family. Every time I close my eyes, I see Sandra in her car with those blankets in the back seat, and then I think about a baby connecting me to Derek for the rest of my life. Around 3 a.m., Derek gets up to use the bathroom and I hear him throwing up. When he comes back, his face is gray and he smells like toothpaste, but we still don't talk. The silence feels heavy, like it's pressing down on both of us, making it hard to breathe. I count the hours until sunrise, watching the numbers on my phone change slowly. Derek shifts on his end of the couch every few minutes, and I can tell from his breathing that he's not sleeping either. The sky starts getting lighter around 6 a.m., that weird gray color before the sun actually comes up. Derek's phone starts buzzing on the coffee table, vibrating so hard it moves across the wood. He reaches for it and I watch his face change as he reads the screen. His mouth opens but no sound comes out at first. Then he says that Rocco texted and their grandmother died during the night. Her heart gave out after weeks of stress from everything that happened. Derek reads the message out loud in this completely empty voice, like he's reading a grocery list instead of news about his grandmother's death. I realize in that moment that we've now added an actual death to the list of things my revenge caused. Not just ruined lives or broken relationships, but someone actually died because of what I did. The thought makes my stomach turn and I have to swallow hard to keep from throwing up. Derek is still staring at his phone, reading and rereading the message like maybe the words will change if he looks long enough. Derek stands up without saying anything and walks to where his duffel bag is sitting by the door. He starts shoving his clothes back into it, moving like a robot, not looking at me. I ask where he's going and he says he needs to be with his family right now. What's left of them anyway. His voice sounds dead, like all the emotion has been drained out of him. He looks at me then, really looks at me for the first time since we found out about his grandmother, and I see that he's looking at me like I'm a complete stranger, someone he doesn't know at all. I understand in that moment that whatever we had before is completely dead now, killed by his betrayal and my revenge in equal measure. We destroyed each other and everyone around us in the process. Derek zips up his bag and stands there holding it, like he's waiting for something but doesn't know what. Before Derek walks out the door, he turns back and his face is wet with tears he's not bothering to wipe away. He says he'll support whatever decision I make about the pregnancy, but he can't be with me anymore. He says he cheated and he lied and those things were terrible. But I destroyed his entire family, including an innocent grandmother who died from the stress. We're both terrible people who hurt each other and everyone around us, and staying together would just create more damage. He says the baby doesn't change that fact. It just makes everything more complicated. I don't try to argue with him because he's right. We're toxic together and bringing a baby into this mess would be cruel. Derek picks up his bag and opens the door and I don't stop him. I just sit on the couch where we spent the night not sleeping and watch him leave. I stand at my window and watch Derek get into an Uber that pulls up a few minutes later. He throws his duffel bag in the trunk and climbs into the back seat without looking up at my apartment. The car drives away, heading toward the hospital where his mom is on psychiatric hold and where his grandmother's body is probably still in the morgue. I think about how 3 weeks ago I felt so angry and justified in my revenge, like Derek deserved everything I did to his family. Now I feel like a monster who killed someone's grandmother. The satisfaction I felt when I sent those emails has turned into something toxic and horrible that sits in my stomach like poison. I watch the Uber turn the corner and disappear, and then I'm alone in my apartment with the pregnancy test still in my bathroom drawer, and the weight of what I've done pressing down on me. I find the therapist's number my doctor gave me last week and call as soon as I think someone might be there. A woman answers and says her name is Clementine Syens, and when I ask if she has any openings today, she hears something in my voice that makes her say yes. She has an afternoon slot at 2 p.m. for emergency sessions, and I take it because I'm falling apart and don't know how to stop. The hours between the phone call and the appointment feel endless. I spend them throwing up and crying, and I still can't tell if it's morning sickness or guilt or both. Probably both. I try to eat some crackers, but they taste like cardboard in my mouth. I take a shower and the hot water feels good for about 30 seconds before I start crying again. By the time I need to leave for Clementine's office, my eyes are so swollen I can barely see. Clementine's office is in a small building near downtown, and the waiting room has those comfortable chairs and nature paintings that are supposed to make you feel calm. They don't work. When she calls me back, she's younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with kind eyes and no wedding ring. She sits across from me and asks what brings me in today, and I just start talking. I tell her everything. Derek's cheating, the screenshots, the emails I sent, Sandra living in her car, the church turning on them, the grandmother's heart attack, the death last night, the pregnancy. I talk for probably 20 minutes straight while Clementine just listens and takes notes. When I finally stop, she asks me what I thought would happen when I sent those emails. The question makes me freeze because I realize I never thought past the moment of revenge. I never considered what would happen after. Never thought about the consequences that would keep spreading like ripples in water. Clementine helps me understand that I'm having a trauma response to Derek's betrayal, but that doesn't excuse what I did to innocent people. She explains trauma in this calm voice, talking about how it can make us do things we'd never normally do, but we still have to take responsibility for those actions. She says the pregnancy adds another layer of trauma that I need to process, and the grandmother's death is something I'll carry with me forever. We talk for the full hour, and by the end, I feel slightly less like I'm drowning. Clementine schedules me for twice-weekly sessions because she says I'm clearly in crisis, and she gives me her emergency number in case I have thoughts of hurting myself. I promise to call if I need to, and I mean it. I don't want to hurt anyone else, including myself. My phone rings while I'm driving home from Clementine's office, and I pull over to answer it because I recognize Cameron Huang's number. His voice sounds serious as he tells me that Sandra's lawyer has officially filed a complaint with the police about me distributing her intimate content. They're investigating whether to press charges, and Cameron says I need to hire a criminal defense attorney right now because this is serious. Really serious. I could face jail time if they decide to go after me hard. The words hit me like a punch, and I have to put my head down on the steering wheel for a minute. Cameron keeps talking, explaining the different charges they might bring, the potential sentences, the fact that Sandra's suicide attempt and the grandmother's death could make a jury very unsympathetic to me. He says he can represent me if I want, but I need to decide fast because the police might want to interview me soon. I spend the rest of my savings on a retainer for Cameron to represent me. The number makes me feel sick when I transfer it from my account, watching my balance drop to almost nothing. Cameron explains that my best defense is that I didn't create Sandra's content or profit from distributing it, but the other side could argue I caused severe emotional distress and financial harm. He talks about Sandra losing $30,000 a month in income, about her attempted suicide, about the grandmother dying. He says all of those things could make a jury see me as someone who destroyed lives on purpose, which is exactly what I did. Cameron tells me not to talk to anyone about the case, not to post anything on social media, not to contact Derek or his family. He says we'll build the best defense we can, but I need to be prepared for the possibility that I might be charged with a crime. After we hang up, I sit in my car outside Cameron's office and cry until I can't cry anymore. The days after Cameron's office turn into a kind of fog where I exist, but don't really live. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I think about is the baby growing inside me, Derek's baby, and then I think about the grandmother dying and Sandra trying to kill herself, and suddenly I'm running to the bathroom to throw up. I can't tell anymore if it's morning sickness or my body trying to reject everything I've done. Clementine makes me check in twice a day, morning and night, texting her that I'm okay and not thinking about hurting myself. I'm not, but only because I'm too numb to think about anything that clearly. I try to eat crackers and drink water, but everything tastes wrong. My apartment feels like a cage, but going outside means possibly seeing someone from Derek's family or the church, so I stay in and watch the walls and try to figure out how I became this person. On Thursday afternoon, someone knocks on my door and I almost ignore it, but they keep knocking, persistent and steady, and finally I drag myself off the couch to check the peephole. Marisa stands in the hallway looking like she hasn't slept in weeks. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, clothes that look slept in. For a second, I consider not opening the door, just standing here until she leaves, but she knocks again and says my name through the door. I unlock it and step back, and Marisa walks in without asking permission. We stand in my living room staring at each other like strangers, which I guess we are now. She sits on my couch without being invited, and I sit in the chair across from her, keeping distance between us. She doesn't look angry exactly, more like completely exhausted, like anger would take energy she doesn't have anymore. Marisa starts talking and her voice is flat, almost mechanical, like she's rehearsed this. She tells me she's not here to forgive me and she doesn't want us to be friends or anything close to that. But she needs me to understand what my revenge did to actual human beings who never hurt me, who didn't even know I existed before I destroyed their lives. Her fiancé left her 3 days after the emails went out. His family sat him down and told him they couldn't be associated with her family anymore, not with what her mother did and the scandal it caused. He tried to fight for her at first, Marisa says, but his parents threatened to cut him off financially, and his sister wouldn't speak to him if he stayed with her. So he chose them and left Marisa with an apartment lease she can't afford alone and a wedding dress she'd already bought. She lost her job too because someone sent the information about Sandra to her workplace. Her coworkers started making comments, asking if it ran in the family, if she had secret accounts too. Her boss called her in and said it wasn't about her performance, but the company couldn't have that kind of attention, so they let her go with 2 weeks severance. The grandmother's last words keep playing in Marisa's head. She was so confused in the hospital, asking why the church people were saying such terrible things about Sandra, asking if it was true, or if someone was spreading lies. Marisa tried to explain, but the grandmother kept getting more upset, her heart monitor beeping faster and faster until the nurses made everyone leave. She died that night thinking her daughter was a sinner and a fraud, thinking her whole family had lied to her. Marisa's voice breaks when she talks about this, and I can see her hands shaking. She tells me about Rocco barely leaving his room now, how he lost his job too when someone sent the information to his boss. He sits in the dark playing video games and won't talk to anyone, won't even come out for meals. Their dad is trying to hold everyone together while processing his own betrayal and grief, trying to be strong for his kids while falling apart inside. And Derek, Marisa says, is a complete mess. He's drinking heavily, showing up at their dad's house drunk and crying, talking about how he ruined everyone's life by cheating, how if he'd just been faithful none of this would have happened. I open my mouth to say something but nothing comes out. Marisa keeps going, describing in detail how each member of her family is suffering, and I realize she needs me to hear this, needs me to sit with the weight of what I did. She talks about their dad finding Sandra in the church parking lot with pills, about the psychiatric hold, and Sandra refusing to see any of them. She describes the graffiti on the church building, the cruel messages left on their social media, the way their whole community turned on them like wolves. The church is still considering fraud charges because Sandra accepted donations and a salary while secretly making significant money. People feel betrayed, and they want someone to pay for making them look foolish. Marisa's voice gets quieter as she talks, like she's running out of energy, and when she finally stops, we sit in silence for a long time. I tell Marisa about the pregnancy and watch her face crumble. She starts crying, big ugly sobs that shake her whole body, and she says it's not fair. It's not fair that I get to have Derek's baby when she lost her chance at having a family because of what I did. Her fiancé left, and now she's alone and broke, and her family is destroyed, and I'm sitting here pregnant with her brother's child. I try to explain that I don't want this baby, that I'm considering all my options, but Marisa just shakes her head and stands up. She says I've already made enough decisions that destroyed lives, and maybe I should think really hard before making another one. Then she walks out of my apartment without saying goodbye, and I sit there listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway. After Marisa leaves, I pull out my phone and search for clinics that do pregnancy consultations. Not the same one I went to before because I can't face those people again. I find one across town that has appointments available next week, and I book one for Tuesday afternoon. The confirmation email arrives in my inbox, and I stare at it for a long time, thinking about Marisa crying and saying it's not fair. Nothing about this situation is fair. I'm not ready to be a mother, especially not under these circumstances, especially not with Derek's baby when I can barely stand to think about him. But I also know that whatever I decide will have consequences I'll have to live with forever, just like every other decision I've made lately. I text Clementine about the appointment, and she responds immediately, saying she's proud of me for taking steps to explore my options, and she'll help me work through my feelings without pushing me in any direction. That's what I need right now. Someone who won't judge or pressure me, someone who just lets me figure this out. Kyle messages me that evening asking how I'm doing and if Derek has contacted me. I type out everything that's happened since we last talked, about Cameron and the potential charges and Sandra dropping them, about Marisa's visit and the pregnancy appointment. Kyle doesn't respond for almost 20 minutes, and I watch the 3 dots appear and disappear several times. Finally, he writes back saying he feels guilty for telling me about Derek's cheating because he never imagined I'd blow up Derek's whole life like this. He thought maybe I'd confront Derek or break up with him, not destroy his entire family, including people who had nothing to do with his infidelity. I tell Kyle it's not his fault, that I made my own choices and they were terrible ones. He was just being honest with me about what Derek was doing, and what I did with that information is on me, not him. Kyle says he's been checking on Derek and he's really worried about him, that Derek is talking about how he ruined everyone's life and maybe everyone would be better off without him. That makes my stomach drop, and I ask Kyle if Derek is okay, if he's safe. Kyle says he thinks so, but he's keeping an eye on him, and maybe I should know that Derek is suffering too, even if he deserves some of it. My phone rings 2 days later, and the caller ID says it's a number I don't recognize. I almost don't answer, but something makes me pick up, and a man's voice introduces himself as Detective Richmond from the police department. He's been assigned to Sandra's case, and he'd like me to come in for an interview about the distribution of her content. My hands start shaking, and I tell him I need to call my lawyer first. Detective Richmond says that's fine. He'll wait for Cameron to call him back to schedule a time, but I should know this is a serious investigation, and cooperation will look good for me. After we hang up, I call Cameron immediately, and he tells me to stay calm, that this was expected. He'll call the detective and set up an interview for next week, and I need to cooperate fully and show remorse. I tell him that won't be hard because I'm drowning in remorse, and Cameron says, "Good. Let that show through because it might be the only thing that helps me." The interview happens on Monday morning at the police station downtown. Cameron meets me in the parking lot and we go in together, and Detective Richmond leads us to a small room with a table and recording equipment. He's professional but cold as he explains that this interview is being recorded and I can stop at any time to consult with my lawyer. Then he starts walking me through exactly what I did, making me confront every single action and every single consequence. He asks when I first found Sandra's account, and I tell him about the laptop and the screenshots. He asks why I kept that information, and I admit I was angry at Derek for being controlling, and maybe part of me knew I might use it someday. Detective Richmond writes everything down and asks about the emails, about who I sent them to and why. I explain about Derek's cheating and his Instagram post, and how I wanted him to hurt the way he hurt me. The detective asks if I considered the impact on Sandra, and I say no, not really. I was only thinking about hurting Derek. Detective Richmond pulls out papers showing Sandra's financial records and medical records from her hospital stay. He tells me Sandra lost $30,000 in monthly income when her OnlyFans was exposed, plus her home when her husband locked her out, plus her community when the church fired her. She attempted suicide and spent a week on psychiatric hold, and she's now living in a different city trying to rebuild her life from nothing. The detective's voice stays flat and professional, but I can hear the judgment underneath. He tells me the church is still considering fraud charges against Sandra because she accepted donations and a salary while secretly making significant money. Harper is facing his own consequences too, with church members questioning his fitness for leadership and whether he knew about his wife's double life. The whole family has been destroyed, Detective Richmond says, looking at me directly, and I'm the one who destroyed it. The detective asks me if I understood that what I was doing could be a crime. I tell him yes, I knew it was wrong, but I didn't care in the moment because I wanted Derek to hurt the way he hurt me. I wanted him to feel humiliated and betrayed, and I wanted his perfect family to fall apart because mine was falling apart. Detective Richmond writes everything down in his notebook, and I watch his pen move across the page, recording my confession. He asks if I profited from distributing Sandra's content, and I say no. I just wanted revenge. He asks if I created any of the content, and I say no. I just shared what she'd already made. He asks if I understand that my actions caused severe emotional distress and financial harm to multiple people, and I say yes. I understand that now. Detective Richmond closes his notebook and says the district attorney will decide whether to press charges based on this interview and Sandra's complaint, but I should expect a decision within a few weeks. He tells me not to leave the state and to keep my contact information current with Cameron. I leave the police station feeling like I've been hollowed out, like someone reached inside and scooped out everything that made me human. Cameron meets me outside and says I did well being honest and showing remorse, but the case against me is strong. Sandra's suicide attempt and the grandmother's death make me look really bad, and a jury would probably be very unsympathetic. He estimates there's a 60 or 70% chance I'll be charged with something, possibly harassment or unlawful distribution of intimate images or both. If convicted, I could face up to a year in jail and significant fines, plus a criminal record that would follow me forever. Cameron says we'll build the best defense we can, but I need to be prepared for the possibility that I might be going to jail. He asks if I have anyone who can support me through this, and I think about Clementine and say yes, I have my therapist. Cameron nods and says, good. I'm going to need all the support I can get because the next few weeks are going to be brutal, waiting for the DA's decision. That evening, I drive to the community center where Clementine told me about the support group. The building smells like old coffee and floor cleaner, and I follow signs to a basement room where about 12 people sit in a circle of folding chairs. A woman with gray hair and kind eyes introduces herself as the facilitator and asks me to share my name and why I'm here. I tell them my first name only and say I'm dealing with possible legal consequences from something I did for revenge. Nobody looks shocked or judgmental, which surprises me until I remember these are all people who made their own terrible choices. The woman next to me destroyed her ex-husband's business after finding out about his affair, emptying their joint accounts and sending fake legal documents to all his clients. She's now bankrupt and facing multiple civil suits, and her kids won't speak to her because she destroyed their college funds in the process. A man across the circle admits he hacked his girlfriend's social media after she left him and posted private photos that got her fired from her teaching job. He's facing criminal charges and his own family has cut him off. Everyone here has a story about revenge that spiraled beyond what they intended, and hearing them talk about living with their choices helps me feel slightly less alone in my guilt. After the meeting ends, several people come up to talk to me privately. The woman who destroyed her ex's business tells me the hardest part isn't the legal consequences or the money. It's looking at herself in the mirror and recognizing she became someone she never thought she'd be. She says therapy helps, but the shame never fully goes away. You just learn to carry it differently. The next afternoon, my phone buzzes with a text from Derek. I stare at his name on my screen for a full minute before opening the message. He says his mom got released from the hospital yesterday, and she's staying with someone named Violet, who she met through her content work. Apparently, the adult creators have been way more supportive than anyone from the church, sending money and offering places to stay, and not judging her for her choices. Derek says his grandmother's funeral is scheduled for next Tuesday at a small chapel outside the city, and he doesn't think it would be good for me to come given everything that's happened. I understand completely, because I'm the reason his grandmother had the heart episode that killed her, and my presence at her funeral would probably cause more pain for his family. Then he asks if I've made any decisions about the pregnancy, and the question sits there on my screen making my stomach hurt. I type and delete about 5 different responses before finally sending something back. I tell Derek I have an appointment at the clinic on Thursday to talk through all my options, but I haven't decided anything yet. He responds within seconds saying he'll support whatever choice I make, but asks me to let him know what I decide, because it affects his future too. The way he phrases it makes the whole thing feel like a business transaction, instead of 2 people who used to love each other dealing with an impossible situation. We text back and forth for a few more minutes, both of us being carefully polite like we're strangers negotiating a contract. He tells me he's staying with his dad and Rocco for now, trying to help them deal with everything. His dad is barely functioning between the divorce and his mother's death and losing his position at the church. Rocco hasn't left his room in days except to go to work, and Marissa calls crying every night from her new apartment in another city. Derek says he knows he started all this by cheating and being controlling, but watching his family fall apart is destroying him. I want to feel satisfied that he's hurting, but instead, I just feel tired and sick. Thursday morning, I sit in another waiting room at the clinic, filling out forms about my medical history and insurance. The counselor who meets with me is probably in her 40s with a calm voice and no judgment in her eyes as she walks me through everything. She explains I can choose to continue the pregnancy and keep the baby, or continue it and choose adoption, or terminate before 12 weeks. She talks about the practical aspects of each choice, the medical procedures involved, the emotional impacts I might experience. She asks about my support system and my financial situation, and whether I have strong feelings about any of the options. I tell her honestly that I don't know what I want, that every choice feels wrong in different ways. If I keep the baby, I'm tied to Derek forever through this child that came from our mutual destruction. If I choose adoption, I'll spend my life wondering about the kid I gave away. If I terminate, I'll always wonder what might have been. The counselor nods and says many people feel exactly this way, that there's no perfect choice and whatever I decide will come with its own kind of grief. She gives me pamphlets about all 3 options and schedules a follow-up appointment for next week, telling me to take my time and trust myself to know what's right. I spend the next few days in a fog of indecision, reading the pamphlets over and over until I have them memorized. Saturday afternoon, I end up at a coffee shop near my apartment, sitting with my laptop open but not actually doing anything. I'm staring at my untouched latte when Sandra walks in through the front door. She doesn't see me at first, and I watch her order at the counter and pay with a card that actually works, unlike when I saw her counting change at the gas station. She's wearing clean jeans and a sweater, her hair washed and styled, but there's something different about her face. The softness is gone, replaced by harder edges, and a wariness in her eyes like she's constantly ready for attack. She takes her coffee and laptop to a table by the window and settles in, and I realize she looks better than she did living in her car, but worse than she did before I destroyed her life. Sandra glances up from her laptop and her eyes lock onto mine across the coffee shop. We both freeze, and for what feels like forever, we just stare at each other. 2 women whose lives got tangled up in the worst possible way because of my revenge and Derek's cheating and all the choices that led to this moment. Finally, Sandra closes her laptop and stands up, and my heart starts pounding because I don't know if she's going to yell at me or leave or call the police. Instead, she walks over to my table and asks quietly if we can talk. I nod because I owe her that much at least. Probably owe her way more than that, but a conversation is a start. She sits down across from me, and we're both silent for a minute, neither of us knowing how to begin this impossible conversation. Sandra speaks first and says she understands why I did what I did. She knows Derek cheated on me and hurt me badly, knows I was angry and wanted revenge. But then her voice gets harder as she tells me I took her entire life and identity and exposed them to the people who would judge her most harshly. She lost her marriage to Harper even though they'd been together for 25 years. She lost her home when he locked her out and filed for divorce. She lost her community when the church fired her and turned everyone against her. She lost her income when her OnlyFans subscribers found out her real identity, and the platform became unsafe. She lost her will to live and ended up in a psychiatric hospital after trying to end everything. Sandra looks at me directly and asks if Derek's betrayal really warranted destroying so many innocent people who never hurt me at all. I apologize to Sandra, and the words feel completely useless for what I've done. Sorry doesn't fix her marriage or give her back her home or undo the trauma of her suicide attempt. I tell her about the pregnancy and about Cameron warning me I might face criminal charges, and about Derek's grandmother dying from the stress of everything. Sandra's face softens slightly when I mention the grandmother, and she says we're both paying prices we never anticipated when this all started. Then she tells me something I wasn't expecting at all. She's decided not to press charges anymore because she's exhausted by the whole situation and just wants to rebuild her life in peace. She says making me go to jail won't undo what happened or make her feel better. It'll just keep both of us trapped in this cycle of pain and revenge. She wants to move forward instead of staying stuck in the past, and that means letting go of her anger at me even though what I did was unforgivable. Sandra explains she's moving to a different city in a few weeks, somewhere nobody knows her past or her real name. She's going back to adult content work because the community there has been more accepting and supportive than the church people ever were. She says it's funny in a sad way that the people who do sex work for a living showed her more grace and compassion than the Christians who claim to follow Jesus. The church members who judged her so harshly probably watched the same kind of content in private, but they needed someone to feel superior to, and she became that target. Sandra says she's done living for other people's approval and done pretending to be someone she's not. She's going to do her work openly and build a life around people who accept her as she is. She wishes me luck with whatever I decide about the pregnancy, stands up and walks out of the coffee shop without looking back. I sit there for another minute processing what just happened, then grab my phone and call Cameron. He answers on the second ring and I tell him Sandra just said she's dropping the charges. Cameron sounds surprised but says that's great news. He'll reach out to her lawyer and the detective to confirm everything. He warns me that technically the district attorney could still decide to press charges even without Sandra's cooperation if they think it's in the public interest. But that's much less likely now. Most of these cases need the victim's testimony and willingness to participate, and without Sandra pushing for prosecution, the DA probably won't waste resources on it. I feel something loosen in my chest. Not quite relief because I still did what I did and still have to live with that, but at least the fear of jail time is fading. Cameron says he'll follow up with everyone involved and let me know once it's official, but I should feel cautiously optimistic about avoiding criminal charges. I thank him and hang up, then sit in the coffee shop for another hour trying to figure out what comes next, now that this one piece of my nightmare might actually be over. I call Cameron right away and he picks up on the first ring. I tell him what Sandra said about dropping everything, and he sounds surprised but relieved. He says he'll reach out to her lawyer and the detective to make it official. But this is really good news for me. The district attorney could still decide to press charges without Sandra's help. But that's way less likely now since most cases like this need the victim to testify and cooperate. I thank him and hang up, then sit in my car outside the coffee shop for another 20 minutes just trying to process what just happened. Sandra could have destroyed me legally, but she chose not to. And I don't know if that makes me feel better or worse about everything I did to her. I drive home and spend the rest of the day lying on my couch staring at the ceiling. The pregnancy test is still in my bathroom drawer, and I keep thinking about it, about the choice I need to make. That evening, I call Clementine and tell her about my conversation with Sandra and about how I've been avoiding the pregnancy decision. She asks me what I want to do, not what I think I should do or what anyone else wants, just what I actually want for myself. I realize I don't want to be a mother right now, especially not with Derek's baby when our whole relationship was built on lies and control and betrayal. I schedule an appointment at the clinic for a termination, and Clementine helps me work through my feelings about it. She reminds me it's my choice to make, and I don't owe anyone else an explanation for what I decide to do with my own body. I text Derek to let him know, and he responds within minutes saying he understands and will pay for half the procedure. The conversation is weird and distant, like we're strangers making plans instead of two people who used to love each other. The week before my appointment feels like it lasts forever. I go to work and come home and try not to think too much about anything. Then Derek texts asking if he can come over to talk, and I agree because we probably need to have some kind of conversation about everything. He shows up at my apartment looking tired and older somehow, like the past few weeks aged him 5 years. We sit on my couch like we did that first night when everything exploded, but it feels completely different now. Derek tells me he's moving back to his dad's place to help Harper and Rocco deal with everything that happened. Marissa is slowly rebuilding her life in a new city where nobody knows about the scandal, and their mom is gone, but they're trying to figure out how to be a family again without her. He says his dad is seeing a therapist and Rocco is back at work after taking some time off, and they're all just trying to move forward. Derek looks at me and says he started therapy too, working through why he cheated and why he was so controlling with me during deployment. He admits he was toxic and possessive, demanding I delete all my mail contacts and prove my location every night like I was his property instead of his girlfriend. He says what I did was horrible and destroyed innocent people, but his betrayal and controlling behavior created the situation where I felt that much rage in the first place. We're both responsible for the destruction, just in different ways, and we both have to live with what we did. I tell him I know that I think about it every single day, and probably will for the rest of my life. We sit in silence for a while, and then Derek brings up his grandmother. His voice cracks as he tells me she died thinking her whole family was full of sinners and perverts, because the church community spent her last days filling her head with gossip and judgment. He starts crying and says he doesn't fully blame me because he knows his relationship with Natasha contributed to everything falling apart, but we both have to live with knowing our actions killed someone indirectly. I feel sick hearing him say it out loud like that, making it real and undeniable. Derek wipes his eyes and stands up to leave. He gives me an awkward hug and says he hopes I'll be okay, that we'll both be okay eventually, even if it takes a long time. I watch him walk out of my apartment and know that's probably the last real conversation we'll ever have. 2 days later, I go to my appointment and Clementine comes with me for support. I'm so grateful not to be alone because the waiting room is full of other women and everyone looks scared or sad or determined. The procedure itself is quick and professional, with a doctor who explains everything clearly and nurses who are kind without being fake about it. But the emotional weight is huge, like I can feel it pressing down on my chest the whole time. I know I made the right choice for me and for my life right now, but I also know this is another consequence I'll carry forever. The pregnancy that came from a relationship destroyed by mutual betrayal ended because I wasn't ready to be connected to Derek and his family for the rest of my life. Clementine drives me home and stays with me for a few hours, making sure I'm okay physically and emotionally. She reminds me that grief and relief can exist at the same time, and that's normal and okay. After she leaves, I take the pain medication they gave me and sleep for 14 hours straight. 2 weeks pass, and I'm starting to feel more normal physically when Cameron calls with news. The district attorney decided not to press charges against me, pointing to Sandra's lack of cooperation and my obvious remorse as reasons. But they issued a formal warning that's now on my record, and any similar behavior in the future will be prosecuted as hard as possible. Cameron says I got really lucky because many people in my situation would be facing serious jail time. I thank him about 100 times and promise I'll never do anything like this again, which is the easiest promise I've ever made because I never want to feel this guilty and horrible ever again. After I hang up, I cry for an hour straight. Not sure if it's relief or leftover grief or just exhaustion from carrying so much stress for so long. I focus on rebuilding my life slowly and carefully after that. I'm still seeing Clementine twice a week, and we work through the trauma of Derek's betrayal and the massive guilt from my revenge. She helps me understand that I can't change what happened, but I can change how I move forward from here. I start volunteering at a women's shelter 3 times a week, trying to do something positive with the empathy I gained from this whole horrible experience. The work is really hard because I hear stories from women who've been through terrible things, but it's also meaningful in a way I wasn't expecting. It helps me feel like less of a monster when I can actually help someone instead of just destroying people's lives. 3 months after everything exploded, I run into Marisa at the grocery store. We both freeze when we see each other, and it's super awkward at first. She looks good, though. healthier and less stressed than the last time I saw her. She tells me she's engaged again to someone new who knows her whole story and loves her anyway. She says she's learning to forgive, not because what I did was okay, but because holding on to anger was destroying her from the inside. We talk for maybe 10 minutes and it's weird but not hostile, which feels like progress. We're not friends and probably never will be, but at least we can exist in the same space without wanting to hurt each other. After she walks away, I stand in the cereal aisle for a few minutes just processing that interaction and feeling grateful she's doing better. Derek texts me occasionally with updates about his family, and I always read them even though they make me feel guilty. Harper and Sandra are officially divorced, but they're on speaking terms now, which seems impossible given everything that happened. Sandra is doing well in her new city and built a successful career in adult content on her own terms without hiding it. Rocco is back at work and dating someone who helps him see past all the family drama. Derek himself is taking classes at community college and still in therapy, trying to become a better person than he was before. I'm glad they're all moving forward, but I also know I'll always be the person who caused so much of their pain. I think a lot about the person I became when I sent those emails. Someone so consumed by hurt and rage that I couldn't see past my own pain to the actual human beings I was destroying. Clementine helps me understand that trauma can make us do things we'd never normally do, things that go against our values and our sense of who we are. But understanding that doesn't erase responsibility or undo the damage. I made terrible choices that hurt innocent people, and I have to live with that truth forever. There's no fixing it or making it right, just learning from it and trying to be better going forward. Some days I wake up and feel okay, like I'm making progress and building something new. Other days I wake up and remember everything and feel crushed by the weight of what I did. Clementine says that's normal and will probably continue for a long time, maybe forever in some form. She says the goal isn't to stop feeling guilty, but to learn how to carry that guilt in a way that doesn't destroy me, while also using it to become someone who would never do something like that again. 6 months pass and I'm standing in the women's shelter kitchen washing dishes after the dinner shift. My hands move on autopilot while I listen to Maria talk about her job interview tomorrow. She's nervous but excited, and I remind her she's got this because I've watched her practice answering questions for weeks. This is what my life looks like now, showing up 3 times a week to help however I can, and it feels better than anything I did during those weeks of planning my revenge. The guilt still sits heavy in my chest most days, but I've learned how to carry it without letting it crush me completely. Clementine says that's progress, learning to live with the weight instead of trying to make it disappear. I think about Derek sometimes, wonder if he's carrying his own weight from everything that happened. We don't talk anymore except for the occasional text updating me about his family, which is probably healthier for both of us. His mom is doing well in her new city, his dad is dating someone from his therapy group, and his siblings are rebuilding their lives piece by piece. I'm glad they're okay, even though I know I'll always be the person who caused so much of their pain. I started seeing someone new last month, a guy named Josh who volunteers at the shelter on different nights than I do. He knows everything about what I did because I told him on our second date, figuring it was better to scare him off early than let him find out later. He didn't run away though, just said everyone makes mistakes, and what matters is how we grow from them. We're taking things slow because I'm still working through a lot in therapy, but it feels good to be with someone who sees all my messy parts and chooses to stay anyway. The relationship with Derek is permanently over, buried under too much hurt and destruction for either of us to dig it back up. But I'm grateful we both survived what we did to each other. Grateful we're both trying to become better people than we were during those awful weeks. I carry the weight of what I did every single day, but I'm learning that carrying it with purpose is how I make something meaningful from the mess. Life isn't perfect or neat, but I'm finally moving forward instead of staying trapped in cycles of hurt and revenge.